Life is Strange, a novel by Kyle Hill. I suppose I am at the point where I am famous enough to make money off of a memoir. I feel like such a douche just saying, I guess writing the word. So despite only having lived 29 years, only 11 of which are relevant, since I didn't do a whole lot worth writing about as an infant, here we are. That's not true though. I'm not writing this book to make money. I'm writing it as a kind of therapy. You probably already know who I am, not the real me, but the public persona that is beamed out across the internet and onto screens the world over. You probably also know that someone whom I was at one time very close to tragically died just 1 year ago. Writing, especially humor, is how I've learned to deal with life. But this was not always the case. 10 years ago no one would recognize me as even being close to who I am now. Jill Jones in large part helped me become who I am today. You probably know her from being in various movies, but back when I briefly attended and dropped out of college we discovered comedy together, and helped to create a little fictional television show known as Sunday Night Live. Obviously the joke is that it's a sketch show about making an off-brand version of more famous comedy shows. That we IRL and all the characters we played on it assumed, ironically in the end, that no one would watch, which allowed us to plausibly claim that poor quality and mistakes were intentional jokes, because the people who were making the fictional show just didn't care. Life is strange, it can also be cruel, and Jill helped me to laugh at it all. She always used to tell me that we shouldn't take life so seriously, no one gets out alive anyways. There are a lot of rumors going around about everyone involved in that show. This book is also intended to set the record straight, as an uncensored explanation of what happened and why some of us involved don't talk to each other anymore. The short version is that whatever you've heard, half of it probably isn't true, and the other half wasn't my fault. But mostly this book is about Jill. As a reader I hope that you take this message to heart. Life is also short, so make the most of it and cherish the ones you love. Like I said wrote before I got into writing comedy I was on a very different path in life. I like to say that I was born with a silver spoon rammed into every orifice, or in other words my family is wealthy. Maybe wealthy isn't the right word to describe my family's level of money. We aren't like, we secretly control the world kind of rich. It's more like if billionaires were Bond villains we'd be one of the lieutenants in their Legion of Doom. For a long time I was an only child and my father desperately wanted me to follow in his footsteps and create the kind of bath salts dynasty. I know it sounds completely ridiculous, but it's true. If you've seen the show you would know I get made fun of for this extensively. Until later when I learned it was possible I tried to give my father what he wanted, which was perfection in all things. Yes, my life was basically a living cliché. All the luxuries in life were easily obtained and doorways to opportunity broken down by a battering ram of money. But all I wanted was freedom. To do what I wanted. To be myself. Not who my father wanted me to be. Almost all of my early life was devoted to school. I was put into a procession of after-school programs, mostly consisting of one-on-one professional tutoring in advanced versions of school subjects like math. The kind of thing many parents would sell one of their kidneys to get their own children into, all of which was entirely wasted on me. I had no natural talent nor interest in science, business, or finance, and so the results of all that work and money were that I became at best, average at it. My relationship with my father was never good. He never showed me any kind of affection, and looking back now it seems like he treated me more like I was an employee rather than his son. At least that's what it felt like. For years I never stood up to him or told him how I felt simply because I was afraid of disappointing him. From a very young age he instilled a general fear of failure into me, I think largely unintentionally. One day when I was in grade school, after being particularly naughty, I can't recall exactly how or why, he decided that the best way to begin teaching me about discipline and responsibility was to scare the living shit out of me. You may be familiar with the existence of Lower East Side part of Delta. Well, the next morning my father took me for a drive through the neighborhood to see all the homeless addicts waking up and setting out to get their first fix of the day. In order to show me what happens to people who don't follow rules, or work hard in life. I was probably too young to see a lot of that. But it had what I believe was its intended effect on me. For all my childhood and much of my adolescence I always did what I was told, and never questioned it. I tried hard to do well in the academic and extracurricular activity aspects of school because that's how you got accepted into a good college, and going to college was what I was supposed to do in order to succeed my father and have a good life. Also because being called to his office to suffer through him simply telling me in a stern voice how disappointed he was with me and the silent treatment he leveled at me afterwards was unbearable. Me and my father hardly ever talked. He was always either working at work, or working in his home office, and I was always in some after-school program or another. But we did almost always eat dinner together at the same time every day, and talked, mostly about politics and the economy. Even at an age when I was too young to understand anything about the subject, after years of picking the brains of an eminent business tycoon I still generally don't, and I'm quite skeptical that anyone really does. I genuinely enjoyed this time, and was happy to just spend time with my dad listening to him talk shop. But when I had recently done poorly on a test or something, the conversation instead of flowing freely dried up and dripped painfully along like a leaking faucet. He would just silently radiate disapproval like the space heater, never and respond to anything I said with short, curt remarks, before heading off back to his office to work the rest of the night. As eternally awkward as my relationship with my father was, it was better than the non-existent one I had with my mother. If I'm completely, blatantly honest, my mother was a trophy wife. She was at least 20 years younger than my father, and their marriage didn't last much longer than my second birthday. Some people, like my father for example, just don't have the knack for being good loving parents. But many of them, like my father, roll up their sleeves and simply do the best they can anyways. My mother definitely didn't have the knack either, but she also had a natural aversion to any form of responsibility. I remember spending the holidays at her house. At a young age this was mostly a distressing and confusing time for me, because this woman whom I didn't really know, I only saw her a few times per year, showering me with affection and gifts was so different from my normal experience with my father. I didn't know how to deal with it. It was like she was trying to overdo everything and spoil me to make up for not being around for the rest of the year, when from what I learned later it was her choice to extricate herself from my life or me from hers. Throughout my time there she'd take an inordinate amount of pictures of us and post them online, so many that our time together later began to feel more like some kind of carefully contrived photo opus. As I grew up I began to resent her and these get-togethers because that is what they felt like, contrived. Why she did this I don't know, to try to irritate my father, to try to prove she wasn't a completely terrible parent. When I was 13 I stopped caring and asked my father if I could stay home for Christmas. At first he was vehemently against the idea when I told him I didn't want to go, and said something along the lines of what you would expect, that he didn't care what I wanted, that I'd go and I'd be the perfect son for her even if it was all for show because that's what she wanted, and she my fucking mother. It was the first time I'd tried to stand up to my father and challenge him over anything, but I still went to my mother's that Christmas and outwardly played the part, but this time I was completely content and remorseless in my inward distaste for it all. I was simply fulfilling a duty, performing a chore, because as my father had said it was only 4 days of the holidays and it was I guess what she wanted or had convinced herself what she should want. I think enduring spending time with my mother taught me more about discipline than all the schooling ever did, and simultaneously planted a seed of doubt and distrust of authority and rules in me. I started to assert my own independence in other ways around this time. I managed to convince my father to allow me to quit most of my extracurricular activities. My argument, in an uncharacteristically astute observation of wisdom, being that he could never expect me to become a responsible adult if he never treated me like one. He was after all so fond of saying that the only way you ever learned things in life was by actually doing them. His annoyance at me rebelling in this small way against his wishes I think changed then into pride, and for the rest of high school I was free to waste my time however I wish, mostly doing a glorious amount of absolutely nothing. That's technically not true. Mostly I just read books, and trawled the internet for the funniest, most random nonsense I could find. My love for the absurd and recoil from the austere authoritarian world of business that my father intended for me to follow him in, are clearly the biggest influences on my work. That exemplifies my kind of style of comedy and source of inspiration than the baby mix-up sketch from Sunday Night Live. If you've never seen it, picture the pediatric nurse being shown the ropes in newborn care. Is that what it's called? On her first day, her trainer leaves to go to the bathroom, while they have two separate children on a table to change their diapers. One of the babies is a bit fussy and makes the nurse drop something on the floor, which then rolls under the table. After getting down on her hands and knees and straining to retrieve the thing, she stands up to see that the babies have moved from their original positions on the table. This is physically impossible because newborns can't crawl, but there is a punchline I was trying to work towards here that cannot be bound by such realistic trivialities. The nurse starts to panic because now she doesn't remember which one is which. Her trainer comes back in and in a rush she explains how she screwed up, and her trainer patiently listens to her, laughs, pats her on the shoulder and tells her to relax. That she's been in this situation many times before, and her philosophy is that if she can't tell the difference then no one else probably will be able to either. Then, to the trainee's horror, she picks each child up and arbitrarily puts them back in their cribs. Cut to a happy young couple taking their newborn home with them. The father is strapping their child into a car seat when he suddenly realizes it has blue eyes. He turns around to look in the mirror at his own eyes to confirm that he has brown eyes like he remembers and he's not going crazy. Then tells his wife to look him in the eyes, then at their child's eyes. They both look at each other in horror and the father says, "I know this is going to make me sound like a horrible parent, but I'm technically new to this whole thing. Do you remember what color Benjamin's eyes were in the delivery room?" "What do you mean, you don't remember what the color of your own child's eyes were?" His wife says. "Hey, I haven't known him all that long, and it's not something you usually notice about people until you're specifically asked about it." "They were brown, I think," his wife says. "You don't remember either?" "I wasn't 100% at the time. I was on drugs and human being just burst out of my vagina." "Can they change, or something?" her husband asks. So then they pull out their phones and Google the subject. Eventually the husband says, "Look, here it is. Two browns can have a blue, but two blues can't have a brown." "Wait, so everything's fine then, isn't it?" Then cut to the parents walking into the hospital carrying their child up to the information desk. They explain the situation and afterwards the husband remarks that, "It all sounds so crazy when you say it out loud. I mean, you read stories about stuff like this happening on the internet, like the system fails sometimes, you know, people make mistakes, but it's so rare you don't think it will happen to you. I mean, it's not what we think, right?" "You are crazy," the man at the desk says, and the couple look relieved until he keeps talking. "You come in here complaining that you don't think this child is yours. It's a baby." At this point they're pretty much all the same. They don't do anything other than cry, poop, eat, and sometimes, mercifully, they bless you with a break from their unending need for you to keep them from dying with periods of unconsciousness. "What, but," the husband says, and the mother demands to talk to someone higher up the chain of command at the hospital. "I want to talk to your manager, whatever they're called, someone in charge." "You've got your child. Get out of here." "But this isn't our child." "It is now." "What? You think your genes are better than everyone else's?" "You know who else thought that?" "The Nazis. Racist elitist bastards. These people are Nazis," the guy calls out, pointing at them, and the parents begin to look embarrassed as everyone around them gives them dirty looks. "This isn't a used car store, you know. You can't take a child for a test drive, then return it when you decide you don't like the way it handles. No, that's not what this is. This isn't our child." "Fuck it," says the mother. "Let's just get out of here," and the couple quickly leaves. The person at the desk says to someone nearby after they leave, "Nothing to worry about. First few days are a bit of a shock for some people. I've seen it all the time. Just got to give them a bit of a push in the right direction so they can hit the ground running. They'll figure it out." Then cut to the two parents looking back at their child from the front seat of the car, and they age 15 years and fast forward before the camera turns to show a shocked teenage boy sitting on a couch. "Oh my God," he says, "so I'm not actually your son?" "Biologically speaking, we have no idea," the father says. "Oh, but we love you, sweetie," the mother says as she gets up to give him a hug. The son turns to look at another teenager sitting in a chair on the opposite side of the room who is Asian he and his parents are not, and says, "But wait, what about Jimmy then? Is he not actually my brother?" "That," says the father, "is a whole other story.